Hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Tips to Measure Color on Transparent Flexible Film. Presenting today is Keel Harder, a product manager at X-Rite. I'm Robert Grothans, the Global Technical Marketing Manager, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. Before I turn it over to Keel, I just need to cover a few simple things. Due to the number of people that are attending today's webinar, we will keep everyone muted. If you have any questions, please use the questions function on the GoToWebinar panel. And we will have some time at the end of this webinar to answer a couple of your questions. Finally, this webinar will be recorded and you'll receive a link so that you can review the webinar at your convenience. So with that, I'll turn it over to Keel to get things started.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Robert, and good morning and good afternoon to everyone. So I'm really excited to walk through a presentation to give the most latest and greatest tips for measuring color on flexible film. So today's objective is wanting to discuss about why measuring on flexible film can be tricky, and I'll go to the ins and outs and actually discuss how instrument orientation, so if you have a spectrophotometer, and depending on the orientation, how that can actually impact measurement results. With that said, with that in mind, we have developed sort of best practices to measure on transparent flexible films, and we also provide recommendation on which instruments can best achieve consistent results on flexible film. At X-Rite, we have developed an instrument specifically for this use case to reduce some of the interference effects that you can potentially see. So flexible packaging is everywhere. It's only increasing in prevalence, and it's more than just to protect goods on the shelf. When done right, flexible film design can capture attention and increase product sales. We've heard more and more again from customers and brands looking to distinguish their products, and so part of that is how the substrate looks and how the color looks on that substrate. However, measuring color on film substrates can actually be quite challenging, even for the most sophisticated converter, and we'll kind of dive into that right now. So one of the things about flexible film is that inconsistent results can occur, and the data might not be repeatable when trying to measure color. And so the big question is, does your film exhibit this sort of interference? And if the orientation shifts when you're measuring, the results that you may get while measuring may vary based on instrument position on the film. Positioning the instrument actually compared to the film's extrusion direction can cause interference, and we've done several samples across all different sorts of substrates, and we can see delta deviations up to and over 2.5 delta E. And so the picture actually on the right kind of shows how when that orientation changes and how that potential interference can come about. So now the question goes, how to test this effect, and how do I know if I may experience this issue? And actually we've sort of developed a test where you can actually understand any sort of interference coming from the substrate. So when measuring color on flexible film with your spectrophotometer, ensure that the film is affixed to appropriate backing material. And then measure the reference and measure it at different angles. So align the target of your measurement device to the area you want to measure, and then take a measurement. That's all you have to do. And then you can save that as a reference, so then that becomes what you're benchmarking against. You can then repeat the measurement on the same location and orientation several times to evaluate short-term repeatability. So just keep measuring 5 to 10 times just to see and evaluate that short-term repeatability. Now, this is where you can potentially see the sort of orientational effect coming from the substrate. So all you have to do is rotate the instrument by increments of 20 to 30 degrees, and then take 1 or 2 additional measurements. So kind of rinse and repeat and measure that and do that several times just to see what sort of deviation you're getting. So then you're able to then record and check the results against the standard. So assess the color difference to the reference measurements. Usually if there's a difference, typically probably about 0.3 delta E, the film exhibits this issue. So it can vary in degree, However, if you're seeing about a 0.3 or greater deviation, the film exhibits this interference issue. This process can actually be repeated at various angles. For example, I mentioned 20 to 30 degrees, but you can kind of continue to rotate it 45 to 90 degrees just to see how the delta E in variation is being caused because of the potential interference from the substrate. So one of the things that we recently did was we tested this effect on 16 samples from a supplier. So we're working with one of our customers who deals with substrates across the board. We were able to take all of these samples and actually do this exact test where we would take the instrument and measure it, measure in a standard, and then measure the short-term repeatability, and then do the rotation to get the orientation effect. And many film samples can be insensitive to the orientation of the instrument. However, several samples did exhibit a maximum variation greater than 1 delta E, and some samples even showed variation when you were rotating the instrument by only 12 degrees. And one of the things that we are actually noticing is that this was happening in the exact, and if you look at the graph on the right, the orange is actually what the exact may exhibit on certain substrates. However, we have developed an instrument very similar to the exact that I'll get into that does mitigate this effect and takes this variation almost down to 0. So for the best results, just more generally, when measuring color on flexible film, make sure that the film is affixed to an appropriate backing material. So ideally use the same backing for the sample measurement as was used to create the target color standard. Also, additionally, the adhesive, heat lamination, static, or liquid layer to ensure that you achieve the consistent measurement data. And so what that means is just making sure that you do have a consistent backing material, especially when you are measuring the same standard. And one of the things that is also important is that the backing of the master digital target should be the same during sample evaluation, as mentioned. So the target creation process and sample assessment process also need to align. So for example, if a target was created from clear and laminated to white, it is ideal to simulate that same lamination for the sample measurement. And can be especially true for lighter, low pigment colors like pastels and neutral colors, given the impact of the backing. And then lastly, as I kind of mentioned and shown on the graph, the XP is optimized for measuring on flexible film. And so we developed this solution back in 2016. And we really derived it because of what we were seeing from the data. And these features around the exact XP do indeed reduce the sensitivity to the orientation issues that I described. So, if you were to take an exact on certain flexible film substrates, you would see that deviation as shown in the graph. However, the exact XP will not see that deviation. However, the exciting thing about the exact XP is that is the same specs models as the exact. And the data compatible with regular exact on printed materials. And actually we do have, if you do have an exact and you're primarily measuring on flexible films, we do have a conversion path in which you can send your instrument in and turn it into an exact XP. Additionally, the exact XP does support ISO standards. Additionally, it supports M0, M1, and M2 measurements, but it does exclude the polarization of M3. And so this was a very quick 10-minute briefing on flexible film and substrates, but we did want to just show you and bring you awareness to that issue where you can see interference based on certain substrates depending on what you're measuring. And so we recommend that you indeed measure to test this, all you have to do is measure a standard, measure it several times, and then rotate it, see if you see the variation, and just be cognizant that you may indeed see that variation. And that being said, the backing in which you do measure is extremely important, but then also the instrument in which you use. So we do highly recommend the exact XP because it does reduce that variation when measuring on flexible film. So thank you so much for your time today. We did want to make this a quick 10 minutes. We know that your time is valuable, but we do want to open up for questions if you have any.
Yeah, thank you, Keel. So if you have any questions, please feel free to submit those questions now. While I wait for additional questions to come in, I am going to pop up another polling question. If you are interested in talking to a salesperson or getting a demo, feel free to answer that. I see a few questions here asking about backing material. Do you have recommendations for an appropriate backing material and where people might be able to purchase backing material, or how people can purchase the backing material?
So what we can do is we have a list of backing materials that we can follow up on an email. But as I mentioned, making sure that it is consistent with the process and lamination. So that being said, what we can do is make sure that we can follow up with a list of appropriate backing materials in which we recommend, and then get that to everyone who attended. So great question. We'll definitely send a list of backing materials.
I use both film and paper. Can I use the XP on both substrates and get consistent results?
Yes, you most certainly can. One of the things, like I said in the presentation, you can actually support both print and flexible film. So any sort of paper stock or paper substrate, you can also use the X-Rite on flexible film. We just wanted to make customers aware that there is indeed potential variation depending on what sort of substrate you are using for the flexible film. And so we wanted to make sure that if you do make sure that the orientation is very similar to keep the color consistency. Otherwise, if you're not using M3 for your workflow, an X-Rite XP will just work perfectly as well on the paper substrates as well. And like I said, we do have a conversion path within our service centers because we know that we has sold the X-Rite in 2012, and then in 2016 we came out with the X-Rite XP, and so we do provide customers with a conversion path to get to if they want to convert their existing X-Rite to the X-Rite XP. We definitely do have that capability.
Great. I'm seeing a lot of questions come in. I'll take a few more. Can we update or upgrade an X-Rite standard to the XP?
Yep, most certainly. You can upgrade the X-Rite standard to the X-Rite XP. Like I said, it is just a RMA through our service centers, and we do offer that. And so we can definitely get in contact with you, or if you have any, you want to contact one of our representatives, we can definitely make sure that you can get more information on that conversion path.
Kind of related to both of the previous questions, does that upgrade change how it reads or makes the readings measure any differently?
It does not, unless you're using M3. As I mentioned, the X-Rite standard has M0, M1, M2, and M3, where the X-Rite XP does not have that polarization of M3. That being said, the measurements are consistent across the board. And you will be able to measure, as I mentioned, paper substrates and flexible film, no issues. We do just see some sort of variation, and we do actually have a great white paper that we can also send out. And so, Robert, what I'll do is I'll get the white paper as well as the preferred backing materials, and then we can send that out as a follow-up email if that's appropriate.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I actually got a few questions asking about that as well, and we will send out this recording tomorrow, so we can include that with this recording. I see there's a lot more questions. We are up against time since we do want to keep this as a shorter webinar, so I will export these out and send them over to Keel, and we'll do our best to get you responses as soon as possible. So we will end here for today. Thanks everyone for joining, and have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Robert. And I definitely want to get everyone's questions. And so keep the questions coming, and we'll go ahead and get a reply to you as soon as possible, because we know this is an exciting topic and we want to make sure that everyone has the information to be successful in your workflow.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone.